All right, to discuss matters further, Colonel David B. DeRoche joins us live from Washington, D.C. He is a strategic studies professor at the National Defense University. Always a pleasure to have you here on World DNA, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Iran's foreign minister lashed out at the United States. It's warned that the United States will not be spared in this fire. What I'm trying to understand is the practical implications of a statement of such magnitude. How do you assess this?
Well, I think what he's trying to do is restrain U.S. support for Israel. And I think he's trying to basically take the attention of the world away from what's going on in Gaza and trying to raise the threat of a wider issue of war to force people in the United States and people in countries friendly to the United States like India to try to pressure the United States to restrain Israel and restrain American action against various Iranian proxies in the region.
Colonel, now, Egypt and Jordan, the immediate neighboring nations around Gaza, now they've both refused from taking any kind of Palestinian refugees into their land. So when Iran says it is ready to play its part in the humanitarian endeavor and Qatar and Turkey stand along with it, talk to us more about what role these nations will play, especially when the neighboring nations have already refused.
Right. So Iran will play no meaningful role. There are a number of Afghan refugees who have moved to Iran. They're basically incarcerated. And usually what Iran does is say, look, if you fight for us in Syria, then for a year or so, then you can wander around Iran freely. Jordan has a large number of Palestinian refugees from earlier Israeli wars. And, the tribal elite that rules Jordan view them as a destabilizing factor. Recall the Black September operations that led to a big, violence and near overthrow of the Hashemite regime in Jordan. So they're not eager to take in more. Egypt views Hamas as a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which they regard as an enemy. So they don't want to take in more refugees either. Lebanon already is inundated with refugees from Syria. About 25% of the population of Lebanon right now are Sunni Muslim refugees from Syria. And taking in more Sunni Muslims will upset the demographic balance in a way that will diminish the power of Iran's most powerful proxy, which is Lebanese Hezbollah. So I don't think that any country will take a significant number of Gazan refugees, and I don't think that Hamas wants them to leave because there's a strong possibility Israel won't allow them back if they do.
So now that being said, there have been nearly 16 attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria in the past week from Iran-backed militias in the region. What's Iran's game plan here? What is your assessment of that?
Well, there's a couple of things. So Iran views itself as the leader of the axis of resistance against Israel and the United States, which they say are the threats to peace and security in the Middle East. There's a problem with this. The axis of resistance is Iranian leadership, and then you have Lebanese Hezbollah, you have various Syrian militias, you have various Iraqi militias, you have Hamas, and you have the Houthis in Yemen. They make up the axis of resistance. These are all Arabs. They're all under the command of Persians. So that's your first problem. The second problem is if one branch of the axis of resistance is involved in battle and the other ones are not, then that makes it look really bad. And Hamas is the only Sunni part of the axis of resistance. The other are all Shia. So we have a situation here where the Sunni Muslims are engaged in the fight against Israel. The other elements of the axis of resistance have to take some sort of action. If they don't, then you have a real problem in coalition management, and the Persian Shia leadership of the axis of resistance is kind of exposed as just sending Sunni Muslims to their death for a cause.
Sir, I also wanted to get your opinion on the humanitarian aid, which is essential at the moment into Gaza. It's not making its way in. There were some figures which said that earlier there were 500 trucks which used to make it to Gaza. Then the current requirement is at least 100 trucks. 20 have been allowed, and finally 8 made it in a few days back. So it is a really tough situation. I wanted to take your opinion on this, that, will Israel slow down the bombardments to allow the humanitarian aid to enter? Is Israel only to blame for this, or are there other factors here?
Well, Israel will say that they have to be sure that humanitarian aid is not diverted to Hamas, and they'll point out that as a matter of fact, the Israeli military spokesman today pointed out that there was a substantial fuel storage areas in Gaza that were controlled by Hamas that were being used for military purposes rather than things like running hospitals. This is an inevitable problem when you have a siege. This is a siege, and supplies that go in, it's hard to determine where exactly they'll go. I don't have a whole lot of trust that Hamas will let humanitarian supplies go in. In the initial battles, the October 7th attack on Israeli settlements, some of the dead Hamas fighters were found with UN-issued first aid kits. So, there's already some evidence that these supplies are being diverted. I think Israel probably feels that there's greater diversion. But more to the point, it's just a very dangerous situation. And I'm not sure there's a lot of guys eager to drive large trucks into Gaza. There's significant risk involved. So this is difficult under the best of circumstances, and these are not the best of circumstances.
Definitely not the best of circumstances, and it is a problem which is inevitable. Thank you so much for joining in on the broadcast, sir. Always a pleasure to have you here on World DNA.
It's an honor.
Right.